"Oh my gosh," and other things in Russian, and said no more UFO reports get published in the Soviet Union.
For 10 years, public discussion of UFOs was effectively brought to a halt. But that would change in 1977 with the appearance of a strange-looking object over Soviet skies, witnessed by thousands of astonished citizens. September 20th, 1977. As dawn approached in the small Russian port city of Petrozavodsk, a spectacular aerial display lit up the skies. The incident would become one of the most studied UFO sightings in Soviet history.
The phenomenon of Petrozavodsk is one of the greatest abnormal phenomena on the territory of our country.
At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, civilians and military personnel reported seeing huge star-like apparitions shooting in the sky.
As it flew up in the sky, it appeared to come over the city and then head off toward the horizon. People who were out in the streets of the town saw this blazing jellyfish streaming tentacles down from the saucer-shaped bright core.
The impressive display lasted approximately 10 minutes. Witnesses claimed that a host of strange occurrences on the ground accompanied the sighting.
They reported all sorts of phenomena. They smelled ozone, computers were crashing, drivers lost the control of their vehicles and went into ditches.
Perhaps the phenomenon most difficult to explain was the appearance of finely glazed holes in glass windows and rocks around the city.
There is no explanation for this fact, but the connection is direct by the time parameters. There had been no holes before the event, and then they appeared.
Witnessed by thousands, the aerial display above Petrozavodsk was impossible to refute. While the sighting remained a mystery to Soviet citizens, NASA consultant James Oberg quickly discovered its origins.
Because of my connection with the space program and my knowledge of satellites and rockets, I was able to find out within a matter of hours. There was a rocket launching that morning from a secret space center north of Moscow at precisely the time people were seeing this UFO.
The jellyfish-like display was triggered by the launch of the Cosmos 955 spy satellite. As the rocket engine contrails were backlit by the rising morning sun, it produced the tentacle effect observed by witnesses.
So this what they call basically the smoking gun of Soviet ufology. They call it a Medusa, or jellyfish UFO, because it was streamers of light coming down from the streamers in the rocket engines of the rocket, as it turned out.
As with previous mass sightings, the government had ample reason to keep the truth hidden from Soviet citizens. The satellite was launched from a secret military space center called Plesetsk, one of several undisclosed missile bases scattered throughout the Soviet Union. Most ufologists accept the satellite launch as the cause of the aerial display, but many argue it does not fully clarify the mystery.
How shall we explain the appearance of some beams that burnt the glass? When the pieces of the glass were analyzed at the Institute of Metrology in Moscow, they concluded that these holes resulted from badly glazed window glass. That is, a purely technical defect took place.
I do not believe that the launch of a secret military satellite would explain the holes that were made in the glass. My personal opinion, no, this was not man-made technology that's responsible for such effects.
There were some reports of holes being drilled into glass window panes and in paving stones. I saw those reports. I can't explain it. And all these sorts of additional phenomena, these additional reports, are typical of what happens when people see a very sudden, shocking sight in the sky and look around them for corroborative evidence. Most of the time, it's irrelevant, independent, and sometimes even imaginary.
While the mysterious holes might never be fully explained, the Petrozavodsk incident had much deeper consequences inside the walls of the Kremlin.
The upshot of this incident was the decision of the Soviet government to create a secret program to study UFOs.
In the weeks following the Petrozavodsk sighting, the Soviet Academy of Sciences received inquiries from several European nations concerned about the nature of the event. In response, the Academy of Sciences requested permission from the Kremlin to initiate a top-secret investigation of anomalous occurrences. Although aware the majority of these events were not paranormal in nature, the scientists admitted in their request that they could not provide a scientific basis for all UFO sightings.
The Academy of Sciences can neither ignore or explain the paranormal phenomena similar to that observed in September 1977 in Petrozavodsk. The program was organized to show that we did not know the answers to these questions and would be studying it on the scientific level. That was the way the official scientific program for studying abnormal phenomena and extraterrestrial flying objects started its work in the Soviet Union.
In 1978, the investigation that later became known as Institute 22 was formally started. The study lasted 13 years and was completely concealed from public view. But why did the Soviet government spend time and money to investigate a phenomenon it already knew the origins of?
There's really no surprise that the Soviet military, even if they understood the nature of most of these reports, would still investigate them. The Soviets traditionally spied on themselves as severely as they spied on the West.
If they already knew that these are missile tests, why do they have to have a nationwide study behind the scenes? I mean, it's not like the results of the study were ever going to be published anywhere. It was a secret. So it makes no sense.
While the rationale for the beginnings of the study is still debated, there is no doubt the scope of the investigation was far-reaching. The Institute 22 inquiry was conducted jointly between the Soviet Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense.
It was very useful for the Academy of Sciences to collaborate and to carry out studies together with the Ministry of Defense, because naturally it was much easier for the Ministry of Defense to get the information we had no access to.
The armed forces were ordered to study what, if any, influence possible UFOs might have on the proper functioning of technical military equipment. In addition, hundreds of thousands of sailors, soldiers, and pilots were recruited to watch for and report on UFOs. No one was told why the reports were being taken.
The Ministry of Defense has an enormous observance potential. First, military units are located all over the country. Second, unlike civil organizations, an order from the Minister of Defense is sufficient for making a potential viewer of each military man, and this was done.
Every single unit in the vast Soviet military empire had to comply with this study. That is, any UFO, any anomalous object, any ball of light, any strange thing in the sky whatsoever had to be fully investigated.
Scientists were directed to investigate the physical nature of alleged paranormal phenomena. The data collected by the military and scientists was analyzed in a lab located in a nondescript building in a suburb of Moscow.
The personnel of the laboratory were not numerous, not more than 10 people, and this number was never exceeded. But the specialists from almost all the scientific areas worked there, from a physician to specialists in radioelectronics, meteorology, and astrogeophysics. Practically all the specialists were represented there. It was done in order to study all possible aspects of UFOs.
6 years into the study, Institute 22 would be called on to scrutinize an incident of global consequence, when a suspected UFO incident placed the world on the brink of nuclear war. The early 1980s were a time of tense relations between the Soviet Union and the West. The era of détente had ended, and the Russian landscape was studded with intercontinental ballistic missile silos. Each contained nuclear weapons aimed westward. It was at one of these silos that a reported UFO incident caused a nuclear scare. Today, this ICBM silo in the Ukraine is deserted, dismantled in compliance with a nuclear arms reduction treaty between the U.S. and USSR. But at this silo in 1982, something went terribly wrong. It started at approximately 6 p.m. when soldiers and villagers in the nearby town of Bielo-Korovici witnessed a strange object in the dusk sky. A military officer at the time described what he saw.
I was riding a motorcycle not far from here. I saw a large object in the air. It had a perfect geometric shape.
At the same moment inside the silo, an emergency warning light indicated that a nuclear missile had switched to launch mode.
The most telling testimony comes from the communications officer who said that somehow something entered the correct code.
But Moscow had not ordered a launch, nor had any personnel in the bunker touched the control panel. For 15 agonizing seconds, technicians frantically scrambled to stop the launch. Then, without explanation, the launch sequence was aborted.
They were ready for launch. The UFO, poof, goes away,